Eriwo, yeah. Eriwo, yeah. Eriwo, yeah. Ayapo, ayato, ayache, ayamu. O meriwo si pe. Ìbà Olódùmarè, ọba àti rere kí ayé, ìbà tí òjò, ìbà tí òrun, ìbà ilé òkè èfè kò yé rí, ìbà Ọ̀rúnmìlà lẹ́ẹ̀kún, ìbà Ọ̀rúnmìlà rí kò tún, ìbà Ọ̀rúnmìlà kò sí, ìbà àkọ́dá, ìbà ṣẹ́dá, ìbà ọbàrìṣà nífẹ̀ẹ́, ìbà ńlájẹ̀lú nífẹ̀ẹ́, ìbà ọbálùrin nífẹ̀ẹ́, ìbà olóyè fẹ̀sù ìbórímẹ̀lú ní àbípa, ìbà ifá gbàmílà, ìbà olúṣọlá akérèdọ́lù, ìbà arúgbó tífẹ́, ìbà ìyàwójú èyé, ìbà gúngún, ìbà bàbá, ìbà yèyé, ìbà olófin ògún fún ní rẹ̀, ìbá bọ́pọ̀ àwo, ìbá ojúpọ̀ ọ̀nà, ìbá ọmọ dúdúwà. Ọ̀rúnmìlà dákun dábò pẹ́lẹ́ pẹ́lẹ́ pẹ́lẹ́. Ọ̀rúnmìlà dákun dábò pẹ́lẹ́ pẹ́lẹ́ pẹ́lẹ́. Ọ̀rúnmìlà dákun dábò pẹ́lẹ́ pẹ́lẹ́ pẹ́lẹ́. Lóòtún lóòsí àríra gúúsù ilé ìpẹ́lẹ́ mi ẹlẹ́wọ̀ yìí pé ẹ̀rẹ́ ẹ̀rẹ́ máa wó fín ẹ̀rẹ́ wá. Abowu aboye, abowu aboshishe, agbo ato asori eguru fun. This is Bible question. Well, if I quoted it, if I died, just coming in, and I use that topic today. Linguistics is IFA. Why would I say it like that? Well, what is linguistics? Let's check it out. So linguistics is the study of language. Scientific study of language. What is IFA? IFA is a study of not just, and what is language itself? Language is the expression of something, how things interact, or move, or develop, or grow, or expand, or contract, or engage, or disengage. This is linguistics. The language that we speak, the things that we engage with, the things that we know, things that we connect to, right? What does it mean? We say it is, IFA is linguistics, or linguistics is IFA. What are the kinds of things that you deal with IFA and with linguistics? Well, the 4 parts of linguistics are phonology, speech, sounds, and their cognitive aspects. Morphology, formation of words. Syntax, formation of sentences. Semantics, study of meaning. So, when we think of IFA, it is definitely the studying not only of our own self-meaning, but the meaning of that surrounds us, the things that engage and disengage with us. And then our physical pathway on this earth, seeking to gain meaning in ourselves and in the things that we seek to accomplish in our lives. What does it mean to be a linguist? What does it mean when I say IFA is linguistics, or linguistics is IFA? Because when we begin to break down the different sciences that are out there, and how they engage and how they open up and how they connect to us in a certain way, it's always good to look at these things from a general standpoint and then a deeper standpoint. A general standpoint in a way that it is more than just things that are spoken, or things that are recited, or things that are, when people get into or thinking of how these things open up, right? When we talk about to be able to understand linguistics as IFA is to understand the nature of all existence. Because not just human beings, how we communicate, because there's many things that communicate with us, one way or the other. Whether it's telling us to leave us alone, to leave them alone, or engaging with us and telling us when to use it, when not to use it. And we're not even talking about humans at this point. Um, the different taboos that people have come from their language. The different ways that people engage with uh, social or the um, uh, societal norms as usual come from, how we engage or disengage with our own reality, what that reality embarks on, how that reality affects and disinfects, or this, or pulls us from those things that we like to connect to. Right? We see bees buzzing. There's a language to this being happening. It's not just random things that are happening. Right? We talk about um, how the water interacts with at the base level, the molecules inside that water. Right? It's a language that happens for a specific reason. Right? Because those languages that interact with each other, and so that communication. Sometimes it's body language. Agboa to us guru phone. So some of these things we just mentioned just there, that alone, is Ifa art as a whole. So many things. And so, come on up, Ty Solo, if you want to come up. Sometimes when things are, oh, somebody's coming up. Ah,
Oh, boy.
hello?
Hello.
Oh, okay. I was like,
Can you
oh,
hear
shoot.
me?
Did you see the topic today?
No, I didn't.
So the topic is linguistics is Ifa.
Linguistics.
Linguistics is Ifa. Do you know what you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, the language.
Mm-hmm. So now language, as we look at it though, I was talking about that earlier. Um, that there's four basic studies within linguistics, or four types of linguistic. Right, the um, the speech of sounds, the study of speech and sounds, which is the phonology, and how they affect or in their cognitive aspects. Morphology, which is the formations of words. Syntax was the formation of sentences. Semantics, study of meaning. So I thought about this topic today just because I was thinking, Ifa itself opens up the doorways in so many different ways that it's never limited. It hits all of these sciences in many different ways. That's what I was talking about mathematics last time. Going to physics, you can go into chemistry, you can go into all these different places and spaces within science and see Ifa. What's your what is your insight on that, Tai Solo?
I'm still learning the language. Um, but I do understand like what you mean by like studying language and how E5 touches so many things. Um, but yeah, I'm not fluent in Yoruba, so it's
But
interesting.
it's not even about being fluid in Yoruba. It's more so like, because language is not only just words, right?
Oh, definitely, it's
You know.
way beyond way beyond words.
And so even when it's talked about, so I thought it was really interesting if you look at it. These four types of linguistics, it's saying so it's a study of meaning. you know, that's
Right.
what Ifa is, definitely the study of meaning, a study of all existence. But and also how things form or connect or build, right? How things are, um, how we perceive things in our life, in our spiritual life, in our waking life, in our sleeping life. What are the things that we actually uphold or connect to that aid us in this process, right? And that's what I was mainly just talking about too, is because I always think about things, study things, and look at how these things really. Even when I was in college, that's how I would look at things from how does IFA fit into this? How does IFA fit into that? But what I came to, especially with this, when I was thinking when I was studying linguistics, it's like there, it could be like I was just talking before you got on, but it could be like birds chirping, a certain rhythm, a certain tone. It could be symbolism, right? Um, it could be anything that communicates something that another can understand and feel and know. It could be colors. Colors is another way of communicating, right? So language is not just strictly something that is um, a physical language like Yoruba or Igbo or um, it's the feeling behind the language that creates it, right? It's the traditions, but all of those things are how a person communicates within it. So that's why I look at that and say, you know, in that context, mainly what I'm speaking about, not just strictly learning or knowing a language, just more so how humans interact with the nature of ourselves and nature of the things that surrounds us. Um, and that's really where we come into that contact of linguistics, right? Because linguistics is just that, is the study of those things, is the nature of why these things exist in the way that they do. How do they create space that one can communicate and understand and another cannot? Where one can understand and see where another may expand it on another level. So all depending on how we see it, how we perceive it. Um, and it's interesting because if you go into many different kinds of languages like the Hausa and many other kinds of languages that have those, those clicking sounds in it, right?
Yeah, I saw that.
Anything. Go ahead.
I saw that before on here on TikTok. I was scrolling one day and that was this tribe. They just clicking. They weren't saying words. They was just
Well, not
making
our
clicking
words.
sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it really is. It really is because it wasn't our words that we use every day because we're using the colonizers' words, right? So
Right.
those aren't things that we even people study it, but emotions is linguistics. You know,
Yeah.
and I thought that was
Body
really
language.
go ahead. In sign language, exactly, but you're not using words at all, right?
Yeah, I remember being told once before that language is actually a dumbed down version of the way we communicate. Um, we used to communicate very like intricately, almost telepathically, and we developed language um as like a handicap almost.
Or just a way to communicate. So sometimes you have to communicate with somebody outside of your scope of where you are, where you live. You know, not
Right.
everybody's going to be able to speak how you speak. Just like you said, well, I'm not too familiar with the Yoruba language, right? But language in general. If you were to
I
go
want to
to,
learn it though.
yeah, exactly. But if you were to go to Nigeria and you see certain things, you hear certain things, even though you may not understand it, you'll feel it, right?
Right.
Like when you hear verses of Ifa, sometimes those verses of Ifa are confusing because it may not be something that you understand, but it has a certain kind of frequency to it.
Right.
You know.
Did you do the sorry, did you do the verses before this live?
So what I did before today, I did um, the introduction. So Iba. So I paid homage, and then after I paid homage, I went into. I didn't really go into any verses today. No, not beyond
Okay,
that.
I constantly doing verses one live, and I could kind of pick up on different words, not all of them, but I heard you heard different verses and different names, different greetings.
Mhm.
I kind of caught the gist of it.
Exactly. And so if just like I always think about this, like, Mike, how you doing? Abora boye. Um,
É caro.
it's not morning time yet. Not where I'm at anyway. Maybe you.
But right now it's Irore. No. I Irore. There we go.
Uh,
Right now it's probably like Irore for you over the over in the west.
Kale, etauku. Yep, Kaleo. But yeah. So about yourself, we were talking about language. The importance of language, and so linguistics is IFA, right?
Oh man, that's actually funny because the last live I was on he was he's a Babalao for the Santeria set for IFA, and
Oh,
he was basically talking about the same thing you're talking about, how language is very important. In fact, I'm studying four languages right now. I'm hoping to add five, and I still got to figure out some good material tools to learn Yoruba. But I'm working on like my pronunciation on all the words I know, so that way I
what's that
can.
in the background? I can barely hear
Huh?
you. A lot of background noise.
Oh, it's probably the fan more than likely. Let me just power that off. There we go. All
Yes,
right, how
it's
about
good.
now?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Well, it's good to learn. The reason I said it like that at the topic is, linguistics is IFA, is because what's at the heart of linguistics, right? The study of language, right? But language is not always just strictly the words that come out of our mouth. Sometimes it's body language. Sometimes it's how you know body language in the sense of when I see somebody in a live or in a on the street or wherever, there's certain ways we may communicate that others don't.
Yes, actually, an interesting factoid that I learned when I was younger is that 90% of the communication that we make is nonverbal.
Hmm. Right, exactly, and which is a good point, right? But when we think about fa, now mind you, you may hear a verse of fa, um, and you may not understand the exact words, like Solo was saying, but then there's certain things that you'll catch on with immediately, right? Because it's the cadence, it's the flow, it's the rhythm, it's the timing, right? Even when there's certain drums in the tradition that when those drums play, there is a language being spoken between the drummers and communicating to those that are initiated, right? And so rhythm and timing as language. Um, and I think that's really interesting in itself because when we think about how is cadence and timing and rhythm language, because just like if you go into a Baptist church, you go into anything like that, you hear rhythm, you hear timing, you hear flow. It's not necessarily about the words; it's about the flow. It's about the meaning behind it, right? About the intent and how are things communicated to those who truly understand just by the facts that how not just the movement, the sound, the hows or the anything else. It's like just strictly how we as humans and other beings seek to create a pathway to not only spiritual but physical But then on the other side, looking at that doorway and saying, what exactly am I seeing? Like in a dream, right? A dream sometimes doesn't communicate any kind of thing. A bridge, exactly. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you, Taisolo. Creating a bridge between many different aspects of ourselves, right? And the environment around us, because that's we talked about science a little bit the last time, um, in the last live that I did was IFA as science. IFA being the pure mathematics, because that's exactly what it is. It's pure mathematics. You know, yes, we know it as a binary system, which makes it a mathematical system. Very most ancient aspects of math. Um, that affects all aspects of our lives and everything. Go ahead, Ty Solo. I see you on mic.
Speaking of math, I had a, I would just say a download the other day, and it has to do with language too, because in school, um, math wasn't my favorite subject,
Mm-hmm.
but now that I'm older, I realize that everything is math, and that math isn't particularly limited to like
Mm-hmm.
linear thinking and logical thinking.
Exactly.
So the realization that I came to was, you know how you have a problem, you're presented with a problem, and you need to use an equation
Mm-hmm.
to get the answer.
Yep.
That only means one or two things. The problem and the answer are the same,
Yep.
and they both exist at the same time.
Yeah.
The difference is the equation, because literally the word equation means equal.
Right.
So the problem and the answer is together by the equation.
Mm-hmm.
And that blew my mind because I never would have thought of that. And it's literally right there in the word.
Yep.
Equation means
Equal.
in the same sense.
Mm-hmm.
Equal means one of the same. So
Exactly.
when you have a problem in life,
Mm-hmm.
the answer already exists. You just have to use an equation. You have to make sure that you know that the answer is out there
Mm-hmm.
because it's one and the same. It's equal.
Yep. That's how it came up in the first place, right? Because
Yeah,
it's there
exactly.
with you.
Now I have a real life example.
Yeah.
I have a course. I started a course this month
Uh-huh.
for like online schooling,
Mm.
but my daughter wasted water on my laptop like in December. So I thought it
Mm.
was done. I mean, I had
Right.
forgot about it. I was like, well, how am I going to do schooling if I don't have a device?
Right.
That was my problem. So something said, take it apart and wiggle the battery a little bit. Mind you, this is a MacBook, so
Right.
you know,
You ain't
I
finna give
need
it
this,
away.
I can't just throw it away.
Yeah.
And I had literally forgot about it. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna have to wait it out. Maybe I can
Yes.
find something else. So I just one day I just unscrewed the screws and went inside of it and literally just unplugged the battery and plugged it back up and boom, it popped right back on.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem was, hey, I'm out of a laptop. The equation was undoing it,
Mm-hmm.
playing with the battery, and then the answer was, okay, now I have a laptop. So it's just small, nuances that I'm, piecing together when it comes to like real life application and seeing real results. And it may be small, but it applies to a larger idea. And like I say, like the word equation itself is like literally it's the word equal. And
Yeah.
that's just semantics. And it's crazy. It's really
So
it's
we look
really
at that.
like
So
that. And I'm realizing a lot.
yeah, and we look at these definitions of linguistics, right? And you just said a few words. You said semantics. You said which is the meaning of something, right? Then the morphology, the formation of those words that keep it flowing, and then the cognitive aspects of speech and sounds. But then again, that's just not, and it goes far beyond those things. Those are the dictionary version of what linguistics is. But you said it right there. Okay, first of all, I have to go into myself Oh, it sounds like it's somebody's thing is. I have to go into myself to make sure that um, I'm fully seeing the whole picture as it is, right? And when you can see the full picture, then you can see the intricate parts too. Um, am I wrong in assuming that's what you came to grips with, right? That's how you described it.
No, that's really that's it. You know, like I don't know why this came to me. I don't know why I thought of that. Like words will really trip you up because I've never what's the word? I've never um dang. Anyway, I've never thought of the word equal and then thought of the word equation and said, dang, that's really the same word.
Now let me throw you for another loop. Now you know how Ejogbe or Shika, right? So we say in this context that people more probably know more of the word Ejogbe, right? But look at Ejogbe. What is it? If you so you've seen those dots, right? But you also seen how it just goes two lines that are parallel to each other that go up. Is also Ejogbe, right? And what do you call that in mathematics?
Two lines?
A parallelogram,
Oh, okay.
right? So and then
Wait,
what is that?
okay.
Then when you look at that and you see what is Ejogbe even speaking about, right? The parallels between the or uprightness or the balancing, right? Somebody has some kind of echo going on behind.
But
So
yeah. Oh, I just want to um say a little bit on what Ty said because he made like a very strong valid point as far as equation and the word equal being the same thing because it's just like you say all the time how IFA is basically a balance and in the last life the priest was talking about how in IFA like there's like everything have a good and bad even when it comes to like if you were to receive your Odu in like a very bad time in your life, it's basically like up to you to figure out what it is that you need to do as far as solving the equation for what it is that you're missing. Because like you say all the time, IPA is the balancing of the scales. You can't have too much of anything or too little of something.
and to piggyback off of that too is that when we look at we said there's good and bad in everything, but then at the same time when we think of good and bad, so good and bad is like when we go back to semantics, right? Not just the meaning, not in that context of just being the meaning, but when I say semantics, meaning more so. Oh, well, I'll put it like this: when we say rhetoric, because rhetoric, when we say this is good or bad, right? When something's good or bad, we want to make it in two opposite poles or something. In reality, it's not opposite at all, right? It's one and the same because water we need in our system. We can't live without water. Our body's 80% of it. And if we dry up, we will no longer be here, right? Um, at the same time, water can overindulge us, right? There's too much of it. It doesn't make it bad still. It's just water. It's just H2O, right? So H2O, or that water serves a purpose in our body, but that water could just be strictly H2O. That means it has no nutrients, no electrolytes, nothing in there that actually aids the development of life. It's not actually hydrating and sparking that electron, right? Because our body is one big body, one big battery. So it's constantly like this charge. We need that charge. That's why we need certain kind of salt content in our system, right? Um, in that same way, when we think of good odoo or bad odoo, there's no such thing. And I'm not saying this to knock out your point, D Mike, just to add on to it, because um, when thinking about something is good or bad in IFA, like for example, oh, I have a bad odoo because of blah blah blah, right? But in reality, it's not bad at all, because thank you, Moro, that that those things that are coming up are coming to aid and balance your system or balance you out as a whole, right? Because when an odoo comes, uh, I need a good odoo money. But all odoos are good. Doesn't matter what it is, because any odoo, any one odoo by itself holds all the odishas, holds everything in there, right? The combinations give different aspects of those things, right? And then those things that communicate with each other. That's why I was talking about linguistics, is Ifa, because that communication between the odoos, even if it's just one odoo, it's like for example, or chez toi, right? Or chez toi. Oh, I was thinking, where are you going? Where are you? Or chez toi is the owner of Ashe. But think about those two odoo. Oshe is like Oshe Awurila, right? The words you speak manifest your wealth, or the words that you pray manifest your wealth, right? Powerful words. Then toi, or tura, or share tura. Or tura is the odor of money, prosperity, success, abundance. If you got otwa meji, automatically you have what? You have abundance of wealth, chieftaincy. Somebody's about to be cornered into a king. There's so much prosperity, promotions, and abundance, and success, and da 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 da. So when you have those two odoo that commune with each other, or chez toi, then you have this ashe that is exacted, that is awakened, that it develops, but it has to communicate. Thank you so much, Monroe, for those roses. So those things, purity, uprightness, and so much more. But it's like when you start to see it, you start to understand that these things aren't good or bad, right? They're not a sectioned off aspect of each other, because we can communicate. Like, for example, if you see two Nigerians talking, you may think that they're arguing sometimes, right? Because they're very passionate about how they speak, right? But then you really start breaking down the words and what they're saying. You're like, oh no, this is having a good conversation. You know what I'm saying? Same context if somebody sees somebody play fighting, right? You may think, oh, they're going at it. But in reality, they're really just communicating in a different way or building in a different
Yes,
way.
I was gonna use the examples Dominicans and Cubans because I I mean I done heard like some conversations from the stuff that I watch on YouTube where Dominicans be like mad passionate about the conversation that they're having, but the emotion that they're showing and the actions will make you think like, oh, okay, they're in an argument and everything, so just go the other way.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
Cubans, they're like, I think, yeah, Cubans, they're like the same way, but to like a little bit above the Dominicans. And then Let's see, because they do well, I wouldn't say it's like they do too much, but they sometimes overreact just a little bit to certain situations.
So the main point is that it is communication, right? What we perceive and what we know and what we understand it to be. So when we think about linguistics as IFA, right? Is IFA. It's because linguistics clearly, oh, thank you. Linguistics clearly is like um, is a way to communicate, not just with words or sounds or feelings or uh, written symbols, right? Or pictographs or um, yes, how things operate in conjunction with each other. Like, for example, or chez toi, like I said, right? Those kinds of things are so potent because when you really start breaking down the Odu and start breaking down aspects of a male and a female Odu, and then you start breaking down all these other, it's so much information that when you start looking at it, it literally gives you like so much information that could be transmitted to you in such a little time in comparison to what how people generally talk for long periods of time. You know, um, like symbolism. So a lot of people say, "Oh, there's no symbolism in Ifa." Yes, there is. There's ground drawings in traditional Yoruba.
Yes.
There's hold on a second. Hold on a second. So
Okay.
there's ground drawings. There's so many different kinds of ways to communicate. But there's symbols that we interact with all the time, not just the Odu, right? There are the Odu that are signatures that are symbols and things like that. But then there are these caricatures. And I'm not talking about Orisha. I mean the physical characters or the physical things that are drawn out in Efun, right? In many different cultures of Ifa, right? But definitely within the Yoruba as well, right? And you start to see that and you start to open those things up and can engage with something without ever saying a word, right? Physically. That's when you start looking at those aspects of Ifa and you start to say, wait a minute, this is more than just the words that someone regurgitates. Now it's the words that somebody says, but now it's from their own context or meaning or process, you know, that they go through. Because it's a process. When someone opens up Ifa on behalf of someone else, and then that thing is seen in whole. I may know that Odu 100%, but that Odu opens up in so many different ways because it's a physical live person that it's affecting right in front of my face, right? They're going through this Odu as it's been thrown. They're experiencing this Odu. They're experiencing everything about the Odu. They're awakening certain aspects of themselves within the Odu. That if that signature just comes up, it's all said at one time without being said. That's powerful, right? And so, linguistically, the scientific study of language, that that helps to really look at things in a way that this science of Ifa is not a simple one. Can't be laid down into one aspect or one lineage or one space or one place because it has so many things that it actually connects to or builds with or um, aligns with, right? Without even talking about those things, it talks about them. Um, and I think that's why I gave the example of Oshirtwa because Oshirtwa is like this potent energy because because who talks in Oshirtwa? Eshu talks in Oshirtwa. Communication is understanding the energy that's being exchanged. Exactly. Exactly. And so understanding that communication builds into so much because something can be unspoken but fully understood by thousands or hundreds of thousands of people by one symbol, by one position of an angle, like a 90-degree angle, for example. You put that into a certain position, people understand that without even knowing what that is. Just like Taisola was talking about earlier. If you put that communication of that symbol of an equality, of an equal sign, or you write something out in an equation, like I said, if you write down or if you pull from your fingers up, 2 fingers up, it becomes Ejogbe because it's parallel, it's balanced, equally upright, equally flowing in every way. And that's important to realize too, because when we start looking at those things like that, it's not hocus pocus at that point. Stepping away from that hocus pocus, halitosis kind of thinking, because it's more than that. And it's actually really disrespectful to put it into that context. Because just write something off, and this is generally what happens with a lot of African traditions, knowingly and unknowingly. It's getting written off because of, oh, that's just, that hocus pocus stuff. That doesn't really have real meaning. That's not a science. Whereas if you start to really investigate, as a good scientist does, using a methodology behind the things that's going forward. Because when you're looking at it from that perspective, you see all of the things equally yoked. Because science and IFA are one and the same. Linguistics and IFA is one and the same. Because we sit down, we look at, we focus, we develop, we grow, we seek meaning, we seek understanding, we seek development. We seek the understanding of what is being said and how it's being said in a concept or the abstract concept that may be being conveyed. And that's Ifa through and through. And we can go on and on about those things, but those are really the core of what Ifa is. And so when we go back to those 3 pillars again, Okbon, Itajo, Iwakbale, wisdom, justice, and good character. And even in that equation, wisdom, justice, and you can put it anywhere. You can put Iwakbale, wisdom, justice. Doesn't matter which way you put it, it's still going to come out to the same thing. Because without those 3 pillars, everything else falls apart. Everything that we see and connect to falls apart if we don't have wisdom to understand the things that we're dealing with, to see it clearly beyond just rhetoric and regurgitating something. Because you can regurgitate something 24/7 and consistently throw it out there, but if you don't know it, internalize it, and it's a part of you, then it just becomes rhetoric. Right? Somebody can say Ashe, 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 but if they don't know what that actually means, then it's a whole other thing. Somebody can say Ashe. Somebody can say Ashe. That's 2 different words, 2 different ways that is conveying, 2 different things that is perpetuating or connecting to, right? And it's important because when we start to look at that and start to see that Ifa truly is the most powerful of linguistics, most powerful form of mathematics, because it always seeks balance. It always seeks harmony. It always seeks to aid help and develop. It always seeks an equilibrium, right? It always seeks a stasis. It always has some form of lever that uplifts one thing so that you can see underneath. It always opens up and awakens that hidden detail, that unknown, solving for X, and understanding why those things come into being, having it on a grid, looking at these things as it progresses, looking at these things as how they are moving through one space to another space, simultaneously existing. The things that we have to do to balancing things out as within a bowl. That's solo.
I'm having so many realizations. Um, I think I read an IFA paragraph, or I think it was some random write up online, and it was saying that nothing can, there's nothing IFA can't solve. Um, there's a pretty much an answer for everything, and you can basically change your destiny
Mm-hmm.
at any given moment
Yeah.
through E5. Um, I'm still thinking about that equal thing. I'm kind of ruminating because it's literally in the word and it's like blowing my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then again, with things in everyday life that we experience, you know, you might have an issue depending on the scale. It's different degrees of issues that we experience, but um, I'm just sitting here like thinking like how I've solved problems in the past and how sometimes we feel like we stuck or like we in certain chapters of our life where we can't get past a certain hurdle, but really we just don't have the equation yet. It exists, we just don't have it yet. And
It's
that
a word
sometimes
problem.
takes trying different things.
Yeah.
And that just it just, wisdom is in small things. Like I said earlier about my laptop, like I thought it was done. I mean, I had forgot about it, but I don't know, something just said, you know, unscrew it, try this,
Exactly.
and boom. So you can apply that to everything, on a larger scale. Like, you know, you homeless, you don't know what you're gonna do. Um, what's your equation? What are you gonna try to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So once that happens, boom,
Yeah.
your problem and your answer is in the same space.
Exactly.
So I'm just sitting here thinking, having these downloads, so to speak,
It's
and
interesting too.
it really is.
Yeah, it's
It's
interesting
interesting to me.
that solo too because there's a verse in Ifa where it talks about how Rumula was sitting there pondering, deep, and pondering. He was thinking and thinking and thinking, thinking, just like in his space, right? He just going there, and Okun comes by. I said, Orumila, are you okay? You all right? What's going on? Oh, no, nothing, nothing. Oh no, I'm your friend. You can tell me. He's like, Okun, I don't think you would understand. It's something I've been working through in my mind. It's hard for me to I had to constantly go through it to kind of make it make sense. He's like, I'm Ogun. Of course I understand. So he says, okay. So do you know the beginnings of things and the endings of things? Of course I do. I'm Ogun. Of course I know the beginnings of things. People make oaths. Technology, come on. I know this. Right? And then he sits there and says, "Okay, well, there's something in my shrine? Can you go get this for me?" So he goes in the shrine, and he didn't tell Orumila this, but he was on his way to the marketplace. So when he saw the cutlass, fresh, brand new cutlasses, the knives, the machetes inside of his shrine, and he saw the kind of shirt that they wear in the smithy, right? And then he saw all these other things going on that the flint that he was looking for as well, right? And so he ran out. It's like, Orumila, ah, you had all this stuff in your shrine. I'm on my way to the market. All the stuff I'm looking for. Oh, you want that? Sure, no problem. Go ahead and do that. It's yours. No problem. Why don't you come join me in a game of Io? Io is like chess. Why don't you come join me in a game of Io first? And then, once we finish our games, then, whoever wins, whatever, you can just go and get it anyway. So they begin to play Io. It says, Ogun thinks in his mind, okay, I'm going to intentionally lose so I can go get these things. You know how long I've been waiting to find these things? Go get these things? How far I got to travel to go get them? I'm going to just intentionally lose. I'm going to intentionally, stop this flow right now. Right? So there, he sat there and he was playing and playing and he kept intentionally losing. And Arumila was like smirking because he already knew what was going on. He said, "Oh, Goon, I know you play better than this. Are you intentionally losing? I know you're not intentionally losing, are you?" Ah, Arumila, you're wise. I just can't stop thinking about those things inside your shrine. My mind is focused on it, unwaveringly focused on it. Oh, go ahead, go, please, go get them. That's what Arumila says. Then he goes back into Ogun goes into his shrine, Arumila's shrine, and those same cutlasses was all rusted and broken apart. The same smithy garment that he was looking for was all torn and ragged. That same flint wasn't useful anymore. So he rushes out. "Ah, Orumila, what kind of magic trick are you playing on me?" He was like, Ogun, I told you. You don't know the beginnings of things and the endings of things. This is the things that I'm pondering. He's like, Arumila, you're wise. You're very wise. So he goes on his way. Then he does the same thing with all the Orisha, all the Arumila, right? Every entity that comes to him. And so when thinking about this, though, in a greater sense, as a whole, not just one intricate detail over another, but as a whole, there are many things that we see, but we only see, like, for example, if I see a young, beautiful, supple, beautiful woman, right? Gorgeous. But she's also old and near her deathbed at the same time. There's no distinction between the young, supple, fertile woman, young woman, and the elder that is on her, last days. They're one and the same. They have the same concept, the same understanding. They bring into fruition the same things that are in existing, holding the same space. And then you look at physics and look at how that actually looks at from that perspective. Physics talks about that all the time. Things holding space is this and that all at the same time. So when we look at Odu, go back to the Odu. Somebody can have the same exact Odu. One has a taboo for red and one does not in the same Odu. one has the taboo of uh, eating chicken and one does not. In the same Odu. Now, is that Odu completely conflict and wrong or bad or good? No. That Odu is actually in the context of now it holds, as Ifa is, the great body of wisdom. So depending on who's coming to Ifa, it depends on what it is that those things mean for that person or that entity or that being, how it functions. And that's important because when we start looking at it from that perspective, we start looking at it from a greater sense of what and how these things move, how they actually develop, how they actually grow. Because that's important, right? That's highly important to say when we say that these things are powerful. These words, these semantics, this rhetoric, this many aspects of saying something and it's saying it over again in another way, right? When we get to the core of the meaning of linguistics, though, it is synonymous with Ifa. We get the core meaning of mathematics. It is synonymous with Ifa. It doesn't matter what science you look at. It doesn't matter how you engage with it or disengage with these things. All of these things that we connect to is rooted within Ifa. And that makes it so clear because it is that as a whole. When we begin to start to look at things and develop them and grow them, and when you first start with a system, especially with this system, and it's like confusing. Like many people I'm sure can attest to when they first started with the system, right? It's confusing. It's overwhelming. It's too much information, right? Then the more and more you begin to delve into it deeper and deeper and deeper, then these things really become, oh, okay, I got aha moment, These things start to develop in a way that you start to have these inner communications, inner learning of how these things develop and grow. And that's where, when I look at that in alignment with what Taisola was saying earlier, that these things are one and the same. They're equal in all aspects. Because you can go to one Odu, hocus pocus to a science. Exactly. Exactly. So now usually people when say hocus pocus, they're usually talking about in a general sense, right? When people say hocus pocus, they're trying to demean something, right? Like, that's just all hocus pocus stuff. That ain't real. Da 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 da. Like when somebody says mythology or mythos. Abaura boye. Dasiana. Dasana. Dasiana. Kianis. But you know what I mean? So we have to be very careful in the words that we use when dealing with DeFi because we have to seek out first the very communication that we want to hone in on. So when someone comes and asks or says something to us, we have to be very careful in how they're doing so. Right? Because a lot of times it could just be, I just want to tear this person down because I know more than they do. And in reality, it's not about knowing more or less. It's more so about how are you communing with that person? What is the language that's being used? What's the context of that language? And is it used as a weapon? Or is it used as a way to develop? Taisolo?
You made a great point when you said it's not about knowing more or less, but how you're communicating.
Yeah. What do you think about? What's that take on it?
Um, I think that's a great point because everyone knows different things, and you could take more from a conversation if you approach the person with a more righteous standing than just argumentative. So communicating goes a long way, you know, instead of combating or trying to be right all the time. Just having a standard of communication in between both of you. It goes farther than, trying to overtalk each other or, you know, out knowledge each other or
Hmm.
talk more. You know, it's definitely what you said. It's really about communication.
And I respect that too because it's so true. Because when you really having a really great conversation with somebody, it's not about how much this person knows or doesn't know. Because there's always going to be somebody that knows more, right? In some form or another, one way or the other, right? But like a good tennis match or any game or anything that engages and is constant flowing, it's not bah, 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 bah. It's flowing. Has a nice flow to it. Has a
I
good. It's
don't
like
know.
when you hear calm. Huh? Go ahead.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but is it rapport? Building rapport?
Exactly. Building a good rapport.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly the word that I was looking for. Thank you. Because it's so true. Because when you respect somebody, and this is to your point as well, because when you respect someone, you're wanting to really hear their opinion. Because it's not just about spouting facts. Because facts come and go. Facts are subjective, right? But if you're having you have respect for someone, and that respect goes beyond just words, then you're able to really sit back and think about what it is that that person is saying and how important that is and how it develops with you. Go ahead, Demai.
Yeah. It also, I want to say it's also about the intention that you have when you go into an individual about a certain situation, because uh, many things, if not put in the right context, could get miscommunicated. And I know we probably like a whole 3 or 4 miles away from this conversation, but I want to go back to the old dude where Ogun was playing Io with Orumila. There was this one thing I like to say about Ogun, like most people, well, when I first heard of Ogun, um, I usually like thought I thought of Ogun the warrior, because when you see Ogun, he has this
You have a fan or something on in the back?
machete. Huh?
You have a fan or something like that in the back? Because it's like really a lot of feedback in the back.
My phone is off
Feedback in the back is really loud.
actually. Let me
Oh, fire! So there's a lot of feedback in the back. I don't know if that's the fan or something that's going on in the background.
all right, all right. How about now?
Okay, that's better. That's a lot better.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
I'm about to say it's probably my earphones. It's about time to get a new pair because the
Okay.
copper wire is starting to stick out.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm just in the same way. I got to go get some more headphones. My daughter got these JBLs, and I'm like, oh man, these sound great. I need to get some of these.
But this is the
Go ahead.
thing. I mean, I would use wired headphones and everything, but I'm not a big fan of them
Okay.
because first you have to deal with the untangling of the cord. Then after the cord get ripped or something, you have to tie it a certain way in order to get the sound to work. And then actually, this is a this was a funny story. I was on my way to the garbage area to take out the trash, and my cord got stuck in the garbage machine,
Oh wow.
and I'm trying to. But yes, I have it in my ear. Like as soon as that cord went into that machine, it took me with it, and I'm trying to pull the cord out, and they were like, "No, don't pull the cord." And next thing I knew, Next thing I knew, the machine finally, let the cord go, and by that time, it was already too late.
Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah, JBLs are good. My daughter got a so you know what? I'll always associate them with. See, I used to DJ, and so far that I used to I used to associate it with like the subwoofers because I used to get my JBL subwoofers and then my all these other stuff in there right along with it, so I can my crown amp and all that good stuff. But
Right. So anyway, back to the topic. One thing I want to say about Ogun, like when I was first introduced to him, I seen him as like the warrior, as opposed to his other attributes. But once I started to dig into Ogun and really learn more about him, like Ogun is like, if you think about it, Ogun is basically like the creator of the physical, as far as tools and the technology that we need in order to get wherever it is that we need taken care of.
right, sure.
And then I also want to go to this audiobook that I heard. It was a story about Eshu, and he was making his daily rounds with the humans on Earth and everything, attending to their needs. But he had to go to the heavens and look for Abatala, and he had to go through many doors because Abatala's place where he's located is so far in the heavens that no ordinary being could just, or Orisha could just get to him right away. And so Eshu finally makes it to Obatala's place, and he's looking for Obatala. And when Obatala finally shows himself, he shows himself as who he is, but he cuts the version of him had was he shaved his entire hair. And so he goes to Obatala and asks him what's wrong. And Obatala was basically saying he had like a problem as far as him creating. And so what Eshu did was took I forget what it was, but wherever it was, he tricked Obatala into thinking it was palm wine. And so Obatala takes it thinking like, oh, it's palm wine, but look, also reminding himself of the fact of what happened when he was drinking the palm wine. But so this is what Eshu did. he gave the palm wine to Obatala, and he challenged Obatala to a game of Ayo. And so, just like Ogun, Eshu intentionally lost, just so Obatala would create a body, and with that body that Obatala created, Eshu decides to put his essence into the body so he could have the full-on earthly experience. And so he while he was talking to Obatala, he was basically he had to remember, like, he had to breathe and everything, because the transformation that he was going through, he was going from being a god to being a human being. So, but I don't think Obatala even knew this. But Obatala made the body, and all this time he thought he was drunk off of palm wine, but Eshu told him that what I gave you wasn't palm wine. It was I forget what it was, but I'm gonna have to go back and find what it was. But he said what Obatala thought was palm wine wasn't palm wine. And so after he had his conversation, Eshu left and basically started his human journey after that point. So just like Ogun, how he wanted the tools from Arumila's shrine, Eshu wanted a body to where he can have the humanly experience. So I seen like a correlation between those two things, but even though they were two totally different situations.
Exactly. So, we look at that and we should always think about that in general when we think about Odu, right? So there's Odu that are verses, I would say, more so than the Odu itself. Because Odus have a basic premise that they have and they convey and they say, right? And then the verses within that Odu, depending on where you are, because it's based off of something that went forward in that region, that time, that space, because there'll be words in certain Odus, in certain verses rather. You can tell the ancientness of it just by the way that they describe or they say or they talk about certain things, which may not even be in existence anymore, right? Or have a understanding of anymore. And then there are things that are still, when we think of them in the context of where we live, right? Meaning there may be Odus, or there may be verses rather, from certain Odus in Cuba that have been reinterpreted because of um, the environment, space, place, things, and understanding of it, and how it comes out, and how it, you connect to it, right? Because things may be described in a different way, right? Um, so when we read things out of a book, for example, when we read things out of a book, sometimes the what's being said in the book can be drastically changed just by the translation, right? Because the translation itself throws everything off, because a lot of things, some things don't even translate into another language because it's based off of something that is in physically that environment or that's in that space. So even when, for example, when someone is like when I'm doing a divination for someone, and I have to explain something to someone in a language that they may not understand. So I won't say it in Yoruba. Why? Because they may not understand it in Yoruba. They may not speak Yoruba, right? So you explain it in a way that will have a better understanding in the language that they do speak, or and not just language, not just physical, like a physical structured language, but more so the the way that they may communicate, even, right? Which is good to know, because everyone on this earth has a consistent way of communicating. Everyone. So to that point, the mic, that's in the same way that everyone is going to communicate something completely different based off of the context and where they are in their life. Which is also really important to understand. I can see that happen when friends talk Urdu or Punjabi. There are words uh, that are only English. Yeah, well, because think about a lot of traders' languages. Like, for example, Swahili is a traders' language. It's not necessarily a people associate with that language in a lot of ways, but it's Swahili is a far stretching thing up and down East Coast, right, of Africa. Uh, but the reason why it's there is so that the traders could communicate with them better, right? Um, because that was a language that was not an ancient language at all. Same thing with Tagalog. Tagalog is not an ancient language. That's why you hear Spanish words in Tagalog, because guess who's that language? Who was the colonizer in the Philippines? It was the Spanish, right? Guess what happened, within that context? There were, people who were Muslim in that space. So you have Arabic in Tagalog. You have um, you have African words that are in Tagalog. Well, why would you have African words in Tagalog? Because the original inhabitants, the indigenous people of the Philippines, they traveled from Africa. So the words that they are speaking, some of the words are African words to this day. Um, and so that's really where, when you begin to start looking at these things and seeing how they flow, it's a whole different thing. They are trying to make Swahili an official African national language. Yeah, that can't happen though. That's hard to do that. Why? Because Swahili it'd be hard to communicate that in a lot of places. Um, yeah, context again. It really is. Um, but those are things like you're saying about Punjabi and Urdu, right? Really interesting, because we start looking at these languages, and languages are so fascinating to me. Obviously, right? I love languages. We start looking at these languages and how they really communicate and how they're 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 dealing with things. There's a movie, I always talk about movies, but there's a movie, Arrival. Now, that was pure Ifa, the way she was speaking about language. Pure Ifa. How those so-called aliens were communicating with her, or with that linguist, right? Because she was a linguist and it was a mathematician. But the words were circular. It wasn't. There was no beginning or ending to the word. It was all at one time. That's why they worked in the way that it did, right? Um, and so that says a whole lot in a lot of ways, because when we start to look at it from that perspective, that they had to bring, first and foremost, they had to bring a linguist and a mathematician to understand how this language was working, how it functioned. It wasn't just strictly words spoken, because it was clicks. It was uh, the symbols that they used to express themselves, right? It was more than just the one dimensional layout, one thought pattern. So even when we think about binary, binary. Oh, it's a simple mathematical. No, it's not simple at all. It's actually highly complex because it's constantly communicating in the code. Because you know what else is binary? Like we talked about before, is our DNA is binary. Just like when we think of cells, when we think of all these things in our body, how they communicate, how it deals with things, how planets exist and non-exist, how there's binary black holes that coexist around each other. Right? This language is infinite in scope, and so when we start to really see it from that perspective and go into it, we take into a whole other turn. That this IFA that we think is this hocus pocus halimatosis, I'm gonna get you, you gonna get me. I'm gonna send this thing to you. I'm gonna conjure this thing and I'm gonna take you out. No. No. So far beyond those things. Because go ahead.
It's funny because when you said black holes and everything, my mind instantly went to string theory. And so in string theory is basically saying how, let's just use where we live as an example. So right now we live on this earth, but somewhere in like another
Metaverse. Mm-hmm.
space or another point in time, like there's another, there's like another earth, and like we call this religion right here, we call it IFA, but on another universe or another timeline, they might call it like something else. And the thing, and it's like, and it's not just like with string theory, it's like multiple universes. It's like multiple universes,
Metaverse.
or the multiverse,
Mm-hmm.
as most people say it. Is Yeah, it's the multiverse or a parallel universe that is similar to ours in every form or fashion, but in some way, I'm thinking like one universe might have more knowledge than the one that we're currently living on right now.
Okay.
Because especially when the government talk about extraterrestrials or mermaids or mythological creatures that live like here on this earth, how they try to classify that data. It's like right now here, like right now in this time, at this point in time, it's like all starting to unearth itself, and eventually it's going to get to the point to where we won't be able to cover up any of the evidence that they're trying to hide, because it's like with anybody who has African descent, like the history that they have as far as where they was in the beginning up until the point they were taken away from their land. It's like most people, they'll try to cover up that history, but us as African descended people will know, be, will know because it's in our blood who we are as a people and what it is that we are trying to do and how significant our place is as far as us on earth.
So let me ask you this question then, though, because I like what I call them degrees. I know it's DeGrasse Tyson, right? If I call them degrees, but he made a mention of something that I agree with. Um, he said there's only one indigenous people on this earth, and that is uh, black people on the continent are the only indigenous people on this earth because they spread out to different places and spaces and angles to different parts of the world, right? From one came many. Um, that doesn't smash on anybody else's culture because that's culture. Culture is something that's learned over time. That doesn't smash on anybody's tradition because tradition permeates and changes and rearranges depending on the time frame and the environment and how the environment changes. Uh, it's interesting because a lot of times it's that just like when you're talking about the string theory, right? Because that string theory itself, it goes deeper than just these infinite dimensions or these different aspects of how we communicate or uplift or awaken or open up or close. Because those things, those tiny vibrating strings that are infinite in scope, that go all the way down to a point where our physical reality doesn't even exist there anymore. Our time, our sense of dimensionality does not exist. Like I said earlier, time does not exist in the same way. Um, Even how we perceive, uh, like I said, gravity, like all the the way we interact with particles and things like that, it's a completely different kind of scope as a whole, and that in itself proves to us, in a greater sense, that this thing that we do or that we understand is like there are beings that's been here just as long as we have, not from another dimension. We're not even going there yet. We can just from this one itself being able to communicate and connect to things that are physically there in our space on a consistent basis, that interacted with us on a consistent basis, that open and close things on a consistent basis, that guide us in a consistent basis. That's why, when somebody says the energy cannot be destroyed nor created, right? It has a constant flow of transitioning from one state to a higher state. Which who else says that? Where else does that come in? Ejogbe says that a constant state of change, constant state of transitioning from one level to a higher level on a consistent basis. That is Ejogbe, or as in Abiba we call it Oshika, right? That and those things that we seemingly are so detached from in this level are so much a part of our everyday existence. Because how we communicate, right? How we develop, how we grow is based off of those things that we interact with on a daily basis. Ourselves, ourselves, our reaction to the environment, and the cells in those things, those microorganisms that. Oh, you're at school. Okay. All right. So fire. Um, you know what I mean? So those things, all of those things interact at the same time. Because we have microorganisms and insects and things like that that interact with us. If they were not in existence, we would not be in existence. If certain kind of microplankton were not in existence, we ourselves would not be in existence. It could process and deal with some of the carbon monoxide that it takes in on a consistent basis. The trees take in carbon monoxide on a consistent basis and guide us. Then going deep into things like the uh, mycology. We think about those things that are communicating through those trees, through those insects, through those microorganisms, and also communicating to us by the way that it reacts to things, right? In its environment. How they change the structure of all the things that we eat. And how these trees and plants and animals react because they all have an interconnected focus. And so we look at that and we look at the context of it in, we're talking about Igbo, we're talking about Yoruba, just the languages. Because Igbo, again, a word called chi, right? And then in that aspect of what we see in different parts of the language of all up and down, not just West Africa, but down in North and East and South. You have the same kind of context of these linguistic markers that constantly are giving us things to that we have like a parallel line to, or the things that we are communicating on a consistent basis with each other, because those languages are constantly communicating with each other on a regular basis, because they all have Ifa. Those people from those different regions all have Ifa, and that Fa communicates far greater than any spoken language, because even though in Igbo with the Afa, even though in Ewe where they have Afa, or any other language, all of those things are people on a continent, off the continent. You'll understand it and how you internalize it, but it's the same information entirely. And that always like bugs my mind out, just like what Tysolo was talking about earlier about these. We was talking about equality. And the words equation, equality, all these things that when we look at them and we communicate with these things and we see how they act or open for us, it gives us a better context of how we actually look at our everyday existence with our so-called very simple things in our life. And that's why when these Odus are communicating these verses, and these verses are communicating to us in a way that we understand them, that we adjust our life so that we can communicate with others properly and communicate with our destiny that we have chosen from Orun to Iliaye. That's potent. That's powerful. And that's even the context of what we're talking about in this this live today. Is linguistics is Ifa. And I like that because, and I thought about that for a while as to why I was using that specifically in that way, is because Ifa is so expansive in so many different directions, so many different ways, that there's literally no miscommunication in any of it. It's not. It's beautiful. Because the more we begin to understand the subject, the more we know that those things are constantly shifting, changing, rearranging, and expanding for ourselves. We haven't got into the rest of the people. And I think that's really where it becomes really, really powerful in a lot of ways, because we're able to see it and see it. Whoa. It's coming up again. It's coming up from this way, though. Kia, how are you? Didn't mean to ignore you. I saw you up here.
I'm good. Good evening. It's been a long time since I and it's you're live.
Yeah, I
So
appreciate you
I'm just
coming
happy
in.
to see you.
Happy to see you too. Are
Yes.
you are you did you get catch any of the topic today?
No, I heard a little bit talking about linguistics and how languages flow and how IFA flows like language. I heard. But yeah.
What's your take on that? What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know much about IFA, but do know a little bit about linguistics. Like when I hear like African languages or even Arabic, Urdu, or Punjabi, it flows, and it's like, for lack of a better words, it's like a cat purr. Because when they talk, you can hear the like in their voice, and when we speak English, it's more like chomp, 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 chomp. It's no flow.
Right.
But yeah, I can see how that feels as far as languages. But that's what I got from it.
Yeah. Also, I want to ask you a question, based off of what you just said. Is there more than one way to communicate?
Oh, definitely. Yes, you can communicate with your eyes, your body language, and of course your voice. Yeah. Hmm.
And then that's what we was kind of chopping, talking
Yeah.
about earlier was that when we talk about language, we speak about it from mostly from like, oh, you
Mhm.
have you're multilinguistic. You speak multi languages, but all of us do.
Yeah.
We all speak. We all code switch to
Yes,
other,
definitely.
right? We all go back and forth in different contexts of how we see or perceive things,
Hmm.
and then we communicate with that flower. We communicate with that snail. We communicate with that uh the wind, especially the
Hmm.
way the wind was howling earlier.
Oh, the rain out here.
And the rain too, yeah. It was
Yeah.
coming. It was
Yeah.
coming. So just in the way that we, think about all the different words in a few different languages, how we describe, excuse me, the wind, the rain, ice, snow, right? Because there
Hmm.
are many different kinds of snow. Because there are many different kinds of rain. You go to any indigenous group on the earth, and you'll see kind of the same thing. That there are many, 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 many ways to communicate, right? So when we think about that in this context, that Ifa is the master communicator or master linguist because it can communicate to anyone. How do you internalize the things that you're taking in? How do you connect to those things that are communicated to you and how they focus on certain things, right? And I think that's important because those same communications that we take for granted every day, like you were saying, um, are the things that if we didn't have those lines of communication, things will fall apart very quickly, right? If we didn't have a way to express, just among black people, to express and be like, you know, them cats over there, they,
Yes, the side eye. Yes.
you know, be careful. You coming in, they going out, be like, ooh, So and it changes from generation to generation, but a lot of things stay the same. Um, and then as we do as human beings, as in general, saying words twice that mean something different. Exactly. Exactly. Spelled the same. Perfect example. Thank you, Ty Solo. Perfect example because you may say a word in Yoruba that's spelled the same, that almost has the same context to it, but because of the tone that you say it in, it becomes a completely different word. And that's true. That's very true. And that's the same thing when we were talking about earlier about how IFA, though it has six primary Odu, and then these infinite Odus that surround it, that are consistently building, building, and building, right? That are on a regular basis, um, not in conflict with each other, but merely just communicating a different context of why this thing existed in the way that it does for this person, as opposed to this person, as opposed to what it was 50 years or 10 years ago and to you now, right? Because it's still tapping into the same source. And I'm not talking about the source of, you know, the great beyond. I'm talking about the ori of that person, or the fulcrum, or the core. Tai Solo was just studying Yoruba, and uh, there was a coincidence just as this. That's where tone comes in. Yeah, exactly, exactly, exactly. Because the context, exactly, Tay. Because the context of how um, we speak about it is the same way that we can open up other ideas and ideals. That's why the Yoruba language is so poetic, because it's constantly flourishing and flowing and growing. You could have a conversation and the person could be flowing in so many different directions. You'd be like, what? And depending on what dialect you're coming at, it could be something completely different. It could be the same word in the same tone, but a different dialect, it means something different. It's code, right? So, go ahead.
Like
It's the tone you use. Like if I say girl, or if I like girl, or if I'm like girl, they all mean different things. Yeah,
Right.
it's just how
like
you
you
say it.
explaining how something tastes like. Well, it was spicy, but it wasn't spicy, spicy.
Right.
You're like, okay.
Exactly.
And you automatically know what it means. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah,
Yeah, she was cool, but not like, it's all right.
right,
You know?
exactly.
And if we think about it, words can actually take an emotion of its own, depending, just like Tay said, depending on the tone that is being used. Like even if it's like in a monotone ref- reference or state of being. Yeah, that's the proper term. State of being is emotion in that. Yes. I also like when I also think of words as well. I think of like the etymology of words, like, and that not just with the English language, but with any language in general. Like how did this word come to be, and what root did this word come from? Like when I was younger, I used to be like really into it, but now that I'm older, I really don't think about it anymore. But well, I wouldn't say, well, now it got my full attention, but like right now I am like I said already, right now I'm studying four languages and hoping to add a fifth language to the list of languages I'm already taking up, as opposed to the language I currently speak. Like even with even with saying an individual knows the language. I'm the individual that says, even though I speak this language, I don't really know. I can't really say I know the language because there are so many words that we as human beings do not know. So that was a very interesting point that Ty Solo made, and I'm so glad she caught that. So I want to thank her for allowing me to speak on that.
You're right, Ty Solo too. It's like policy and police and policy. There's so many
Yes.
words like that. It's so true.
I'm about to say it's both of those words are literally almost the same word. It's just the last letter is what makes it different.
And then even the
Like in
context, right?
fact, even with my actual name, DeMichael, like if I took away the H and the E and switch around the C and M, my name literally spells decimal.
Mm-hmm.
So it it I had that revelation recently, so it was like a aha moment on, say, like for myself, on how I'm so good at math and how me having me being able to enter the world of IFA was already like a predestined thing for me. So
And so that's a good thing. Oh, uh, something happened, but that's true because when I think when we think of words from the way that we deal with them now in this context today, and we take out all of the vowels of a word, you have the basic utterance of what that word says, right? Right. Right. All of these things start to come in, even if you start to replace it, even if you write it one way, the context of what you're reading stays the same because our mind automatically puts it into what it's saying. But I think what Tai Solo also was speaking on in another way was that when we are looking at a word that has the same basic meaning, that word in the context that is used. So to enforce this policy that is going forward so that these things are taken care of in a certain way, whereas the one that is strictly policing or enforcing, not opening the doorway, but fully protecting property, not people. Then we start to look at those things that as we start to say words to each other, or how we have effective communication with each other, is coming from our background. And how do I look at these things that I say that are of certain kind of focus?